Hello humans, today I want to talk about this guy right here. This is a Kershaw shuffle, as you can see. General packaging, not much to say. We have our fucking Proposition 65 warning. This one informs you this product can expose you to chemicals including lead. That's interesting. I wonder how this might expose me to lead, because they're not allowed to put it in the paint or anything. Well, I guess there's lots of ways to get exposed to lead. Yeah. Right, I forgot about this. Kershaw has these nice boxes, all things considered. There's the knife itself. Jesus, this near comes with a friggin' book. And just plain cardboard box, burn it, recycle it, do whatever you want to do with it. I really like that. Oh, this is that disgusting package. Okay, then. So, here we have our road information. Oh my god, it folds out. Okay, how do we start? Okay. Correct pocket clip usage. See, this type of stuff actually makes a lot of sense to me to have in Kershaw's lineup of stuff, because Kershaw is one of those like first point of contact companies. They make lots of really interesting, kind of ridiculous stuff that, to me at least, like, it makes a lot of sense why you'd want stuff like this, because people who are just coming in from gas station knives are likely going to gravitate towards Kershaw's because they have sort of that aesthetic. Like, hold up, let me just find a couple over here in the old collection. Here's the two that I'm thinking of, right? Because, like, here's the Kershaw capsule, which this is different. This is actually kind of unique, kind of interesting, right? Something a gas station knife person might gravitate towards. And it's too big to show up on screen right now. But this is the Strata XL, which again, right, like it's huge and kind of ridiculous. And this is the type of thing that somebody who's just fresh over from gas station knives is going to gravitate towards. Both of these are Kershaw's. So having stuff like, you know, how to use a pocket clip, how to use thumb studs, how to use flippers, how different lock types work. What the fuck's a hawk lock? Oh, is hawk lock? No. Hawk lock is not what they're calling their crossbar lock, I don't think. Interesting. I'm going to have to learn about what a hawk lock is and pick one of those up. But all these different types of locks and how they all work, right? Like how to operate them all. This all makes sense to me being in a Kershaw box. Kershaw is definitely the type of company that is going to be, you know, your first point. Oh, yo, that's actually the shuffle right there in the marketing, right there. That's kind of cool. Anyway, your different parts, just stuff that makes a lot of sense to me. Is there anything on the back? Yeah, liability, warning, knives are extremely sharp, yada, 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 limited lifetime warranty, blade replacement. Okay. But yeah, kind of cool that Kershaw has that. I actually quite like that. I think that is a good call from Kershaw. Now we have our dog poo bag, disgusting, and the knife itself. So this is a fairly small knife that provides a fairly close, I don't know, I can get a full 4-finger grip on there. It's very prescriptive. This is a little bit tight for my fingers, but you get a small amount of blade and a whole lot of handle. I got mine in purple and black wash. You can see that, like, the handle itself is actually covered in little Kershaw logos. Okay then. Got your pocket clip. You've actually got a bottle opener on the back. I'm going to have to try that out over the next week. And you have this little pry bar too, built into this sort of back spacer. This is just hard plastic handles, kind of meh, nothing super impressive. The detent though, it's a very heavy feeling detent. And it's a little, like, you can see it is pretty tight for me. Like, yeah, it's kind of a 3.5-finger grip. But for a package this small, you are getting quite a bit out of it. 8CR, 13 MOV, Chinese made, Kershaw's black wash. We have fairly high, that's a hollow grind. on a plain edge blade with thumb studs. Very nice. Like that's a pretty good, finger choil. You can mount the pocket clip for either position, and it is a liner lock. Although because of the way that like this is designed to be held, that massive front choil, it kind of feels like a mid-mounted liner lock, which is just it's very different. Why is there a sharp edge? It's a little bit of a sharp edge right there. Just a little QC note. Doesn't surprise me overly. I mean, this was after taxes like $60, which is not a very large amount of money. You got to keep in mind, I am Canadian. I'm paying in Canadian dollars. I don't know what the US conversion rate is, but on balance, it's probably what, like a 30, maybe $35 US, and then has to get up here. I live fairly rural, so yeah, on balance, very comfortably in the budget territory. It's not uncomfortable. It is definitely tight. So for the edge, oh yeah, that hollow grind is just making a super slicey feeling. And for the edge itself, okay, it might be super slicey, but it is not very well refined. Like I can feel the little micro burrs, or not burrs, little micro serrations. So this definitely isn't a very well refined edge. But I mean, you can see, right? Geometry is doing a lot for me here. Just like it's slicing, not due to any level of like sharpness or lack thereof, which it is sharp, don't get me wrong, but it's not the sharpness that's doing those nice easy cuts. That is 110% just the geometry of this guy. So yeah, I got it in purple and black because I like purple and black. I think it's super cool looking. I do really like Kershaw's black tumbled wash. I think they call it black wash. Little drop point blade, little swedge, nothing super remarkable about it. You've got this jimping kind of in the back, so like once your hand's in there, it's not moving. Isn't like it's pretty tight. This is probably more suited to somebody with child-sized hands, quite frankly. But yeah, initial impressions, it's nothing to write home about, but there's nothing significantly wrong with it. As always, I'm going to play with this guy for a little while and sort of get a better feel for it. But right out the box, this definitely feels like a budget knife. It's not, I don't think it's assisted. No, it's not assisted, it's just really tight feeling. And it's got a really stiff detent for what it is. I mean, you can see like that massive detent gouge right there. So, yeah, definitely kind of interesting. I will be back in about a week. And we are back. So I've been playing with this guy here for a little bit on and off. I've only carried it a couple times, and I'm going to get into why in a little bit. But overall, I had a fairly positive experience. I didn't have any negative experiences in particular with it, other than the bottle opener just being really uncomfortable, especially when you're squeezing, like with any degree of squeezing on this, it ends up being fairly uncomfortable, which is, a little bit unfortunate. Action's okay. It's a little, it's not as satisfying as you want it to be. Largely because there's no comfortable way to close it because of how small the handle is, where the bottle opener is. It just ends up always poking me in the hand. Like you can see it's poking between my fingers right there. Every time I close it, I'm getting poked with the bottle opener, which is just a little unfortunate. The pry bar works. I didn't use the pry bar very much. I don't have too much uses for a pry bar in my day-to-day life. The bottle opener works. I found it to be more finicky than the bottle opener on my Swiss Army knife. So again, I didn't use it very often, but it was, fine. And I think that a lot about this knife just sort of feels in that fine category for me. Having the big, that's a nice finger choil, and it is actually large enough and comfortable enough to use to where it's not something I feel uncomfortable or I'm unhappy about using on a day-to-day basis, which is, I was a little surprised by. I'm used to quite a bit of a longer knife, but it handled everything I needed it to handle fairly well. Having that much space for the hollow grind, you can see the hollowness of the hollow grind there. Having that much space for the hollow grind makes it fairly slicey, and the shouldering is fairly minor, a lot more minor than I would have expected, which means that in a slice it did a fairly good job. But the blade is too short and kind of too small, and the thumb stud is in too much of the way for this to be really a hard use knife for me. Like, I have a hard time throwing it in any heavier, more serious tasks. And as a result, for its size, this is a lot to commit to in the pocket. We're kind of talking about sizes, so I'm going to do my size comparisons right now. Here it is next to the Wee Banter and the Civivi Chevalier. And you can see it's a lot smaller than either. Like, a noticeable amount smaller than either, which is kind of unfortunate. Because in terms of like the amount of finger space you have, even though it's a very prescriptive grip, you have more, or not quite more, you have basically the same amount of space as the Wee Banter, which is a fairly comfortable knife, all things considered. And then here it is next to the Buck 110. And it is just absolutely dwarfed by the Buck 110. Like, this thing, it's not a big knife. And here it is next to a Zippo. Honestly, I think that the Zippo is probably the closest comparison that I've got here to show off today. But, and what I mean by this being like a fairly large amount to carry in the pocket, you can see it is basically the same height closed as the Zippo is, which is, it's not so bad when it's a Zippo and it fits nicely into your fifth pocket, like it slips in there perfectly. But for a knife, if I'm committing to this much width in my pocket, I want something more comfortable and more substantial. It's not very thick though. You can see here it is next to the Buck 110, and it's quite a bit smaller than the Buck 110. Here it is next to the Zippo, and it's even smaller than the Zippo is, like, not tons, but noticeably. So, you know, I would consider this to be a very small knife personally. But it does have, you know, for me at least, a little bit cramped, but a full 4-finger grip. There's no real good place to put your thumb. There's no jimping or anything like that, which is a little unfortunate. There's jimping back here, which is a really weird spot to put jimping when that's like where your hand is getting jabbed. But whatever. So yeah, like you are locked in. If you are using this knife, you are locked into the grip that you have, which is, if it fits your hand, that is fine. For me, like I said, I'm a little cramped, especially in my bottom 3 fingers here, and this is pretty uncomfortable to use for a longer period of time. 8CR 13 MOV, not a steel I necessarily like, but this is quite a budget knife, so I don't dislike it that much either. And it's not like the most uncomfortable thing in the world either. The handle scales, they feel very cheap. They're not, again, they're not like atrocious or anything, but they're not nice to use by any means. They're on the low end of okay for a budget knife, but this wasn't a very expensive knife, and a lot of sins can be forgiven for an inexpensive knife, right? The handle scales are something I would forgive. The ergonomics, I personally would not. Like, this is cramped feeling for me, and that makes it difficult to do any harder use tasks with, or even some later use tasks, I found. The pocket clip is fine. It's exactly that. It's fine. It stands a little bit proud for my tastes, but it's fairly deep carry. The only thing that's going to be sticking out is going to be that pry bar head. And as for hardware, let's see what we've got. I'm going to guess it's going to be a T8 pivot and T6 body screws. Let's find out. T8. Yeah, the pivot is absolutely a T8. And T6 for the body. Yeah, that's T6 for the body. So, you know, it's for a small knife, I guess it's fine. You have to give it some leeway, but it's not the preferred option. And there's enough stuff going on here that's just like, it's not on its own a big problem, but when you add them all up, I definitely do feel like this is a knife that I would skip on if I were to do it again. My biggest thing is absolutely the ergonomics, but it does just feel a little bit cheap and a little bit uncomfortable, and the bottle opener doesn't add anything and absolutely subtract something. The pry bar, if you use a pry bar, is fine. Like, it's actually not that bad to use, I found. But again, I carry a Swiss Army knife around, right? I'm actually just going in my pockets right now to grab it because hiccup. I want to make this comparison properly. There it is. So, with my Swiss Army knife, I have this cap lifter, which I find that this is easier and more consistent to use than this, and I don't spill stuff as much. And it also does function as a pry bar, and whilst I wouldn't pry super duper hard with it, you know, because you are prying up against the pin construction of the thing, whereas with this, it's a fairly solid hunk. I actually found I prefer prying with my Swiss Army knife. So, it's just my take on it, but I absolutely do not find that this is a nice knife to use for that. Yeah. Kershaw Shuffle 2. I'd skip on it. Honestly, I don't. In a less expensive price range, you have things like the Buck 113, which is a truly phenomenal knife, especially when you can get it at like the $10 zone, right? And for a little bit more, you have stuff like the Buck 261, the funky Haxby thing, with its really unique lock. And you have, like, even just in Buck's arsenal, you have some significantly better options. And for small knives, Kershaw has better options in this price range, in my opinion, which mean I don't think it has a very good place, and it's not comfortable enough. There's nothing that stands out as being good, in my opinion. There's things that stand out as being fine, but there's nothing that stands out as being good, which means as soon as there's any negatives against it, it becomes very difficult to recommend. So yeah, I personally would skip on this. I'm not upset necessarily that I own it. Like, this isn't a bad knife that I'm gonna get rid of or do something with, but it's not amazing by any means. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.